Hello, and in this part 2 IELTS speaking video, I'm going to look at the topic, describe a beautiful city you know. You should say where it is, how you know about it, what it is famous for, and explain why you think it is a beautiful city. I'm going to talk about London, and I'm going to pretend that I haven't visited it before, so if you are going to talk about London, then you can use some of the things that I say. It doesn't say in this topic that you have to have visited it, it is just a beautiful city you know. And at the end, I will take a look at a few part 3 questions as well. I have decided to talk about a city that I only know through the media, as to date I have not been lucky enough to visit it, and this city is London. London is the capital city of the UK and is located in the south of the country. Off the top of my head, it has just under 10 million inhabitants and is teeming with visitors and holidaymakers. London has a long history, and this can be seen in its buildings such as the Houses of Parliament and iconic buildings such as Big Ben and Buckingham Palace, where the Queen of England resides. These buildings give the place a historical feel, and I imagine that it is like being in a Harry Potter book when you are walking around. The impression I have is that London is picturesque because it has a perfect blend of modern and traditional architecture. I like this contrast between the old and new. Paris has this as well, but it does not blend it well like London. It is separated into historical and contemporary. In addition to its buildings, London is an unusual city because it is filled with public parks such as Hyde Park. These are huge open spaces filled with trees, flowers and wildlife. For the residents of London, who have very little outdoor space, these are not only attractive places, but also great for getting some fresh air or walking your dog. For those visiting the city, I imagine these are great places to visit and have a picnic, if it isn't raining. I've heard it rains a lot in England though. Another thing that I've heard about London is that it is a multicultural city, and this makes it a colourful place, as you have places such as Chinatown, where there are a large number of Chinese restaurants. As a football fan, if I were to visit London, I would go to the football stadiums such as the Emirates Stadium, which is home to the Arsenal football team, and from the pictures I've seen, it's a stunningly beautiful stadium. So let's take a look at some of the language I have decided to talk about, so know exactly what your opening line is for your part 2. So I'm saying I only know this city through the media. That means through television, through radio, through newspapers. I have not been lucky enough to, useful for other topics as well. So describe a place you'd like to visit or something you'd like to do. I have not been lucky enough to, and this means you have not been fortunate enough to do something. It's the capital city of the UK. The capital city is the main city in a country. Off the top of my head, I've used this a few times now, I want you to try and get it in your part 2 speaking, or even in your part 3, that when you say something and you don't know the exact number of something or the exact date of something, don't use this in writing, but it's fabulous for IELTS speaking. So off the top of my head, it has just under 10 million inhabitants, so under 10 million people living there. It actually has about 8 million, but I'm saying, I don't know exactly. And it is located in the south of the country. You use this to talk about your hometown as well. Is located in, is situated in. I come from Paris, which is located in the north of the country. Is teeming with, I've used this previously to talk about the place where you live, and it means is full of. visitors and holiday makers. Sometimes you have an IELTS writing task 1 where you have to analyse data and it has visitors to a place. Remember, you can use the word holiday makers as well. When cities are old, we say they have a long history. I mentioned this word in the buildings video. If something's iconic, it's very, very famous. So somebody can see Big Ben and immediately know it's London. Where the Queen of England resides. To reside means to live. A historical feel. So even though it's an old city, now I'm talking about how it feels, the atmosphere in the place. It has a historical feel. The impression I have, this means the image I have in my head. Picturesque, this is quite a difficult word to say, but it's basically picture and esque, and it means very beautiful, like you are looking at a picture. Picturesque. It has a perfect blend of, and you could use this for talking about your hometown, and it means a mixture of. A perfect blend. To blend, we use it in cooking, and it's when we're mixing things. Architecture. These are the buildings in a place. We talk about the architecture. I like this contrast. If there's a contrast, there's a difference between something. But Paris doesn't blend it, it doesn't mix it as well, because you've got a historical part, an old part, and a contemporary part, a new part. In addition to, as well as, remember to use that in IELTS writing as well because it's more complex, the residents of London, the people who reside there, the inhabitants. Outdoor space, so people in London don't have houses with gardens, a lot of them live in apartments, and we call this outdoor space, so they can go to the parks to get some fresh air. When we go outside, we talk about getting some fresh air. I need to go out and get some fresh air, and it just means to feel better because you're outside and the air is fresher than inside. For those visiting the city, this is quite complex grammar because it is for those who are visiting the city, and it's reduced. We've reduced the relatively clause and we've dropped the word people. So for those visiting the city, if it isn't raining, IELTS examiners like any continuous tenses. I've heard it rains a lot in England though, so this is like, however, I've heard it rains a lot in England. Another thing I've heard about, so you're going to add another point, it's multicultural. There are lots of different nationalities and people from different cultures living there. So when you have a multicultural place, it makes it very colourful. And if you are talking about, well, any city, think about if you were to visit there, and then you can get some second conditional in your answer. If I were to visit Paris, if I were to visit New York, I would go to. What would you do? You don't need to talk about the football stadiums if you're not interested in football, but think about what you would do if you were to visit there, and then you're getting a bit more grammatical range in your answer. And it's stunningly beautiful. This is a synonym of very, very beautiful. So it's a stunningly beautiful stadium. You can talk about a city being stunningly beautiful, and we also use it to describe people as well. Hope you found that useful. So now we'll move on to look at a couple of Part 3 questions connected with this topic. If you get this topic in Part 2, they might ask you about tourists, and are tourists visiting a place, is it a positive thing or a negative thing? There are sometimes Task 2 essays on this topic as well, so this vocabulary might be useful for your IELTS writing as well. Well, I would say overwhelmingly it is a positive thing, as many places could not survive without tourism. So it's like saying overwhelmingly, so mainly, largely positive, so mostly positive, overwhelmingly positive. They generate income for the country and provide many jobs in sectors such as the service industry. So generate income, make money, bring in money. Sectors, we have industrial sectors like the agricultural sector. And here I want to mention the service industry. And the service industry is any company or business that provides a service, such as restaurants or hotels. So they're making money for the country and providing jobs in restaurants and hotels. And the much more complex way of saying it is this. So although I've said it's overwhelmingly positive, I am going to mention a negative thing now. And they can cause damage to the landscape. For example, with litter, vandalism, traffic congestion, pollution. Litter means throwing things on the ground. Vandalism means damage to property, buildings, etc. Traffic congestion, traffic jams, and pollution. So these are all negative things that tourists can cause. And in addition to that, local goods can become expensive because tourists will pay more. And what I mean is that prices rise, and so local people are having to pay more for their goods because the tourists will pay more for them. So there's an increase in prices. So you've got very good arguments there for an essay, but also very good answers if you're asked this question for this topic. And the final part 3 I'd like to look at is, why do people like visiting historical places? Well, some are genuinely interested in history, so it is both for enjoyment and educational purposes. To be genuinely interested in something means to be really and truthfully interested. Sometimes people pretend they're interested in things so that it makes them look good, but I'm saying some people are genuinely interested. And so you are doing it for enjoyment and educational purposes, and this just means for enjoyment and educational reasons. It sounds more complex: enjoyment purposes, educational purposes. Another reason could be that if you are interested in a particular place, Japan for example, then visiting its historical places of interest can give you a better understanding of the culture and the people. So you want to find out more about the country, then go to visit its historical places of interest. So instead of repeating places, I've said places of interest. And finally, nowadays there are a lot of visitors who visit historical places because they are Instagrammable, Insta-worthy, and they can put the images on social media to show off. Now, Instagrammable, Insta-worthy, these are very new words, and they have come into our vocabulary because now a lot of people use Instagram. And what people now do is, if they're eating, if they're visiting a place, all they think about is, can I put a picture on Instagram? And we have two ways of saying this. They aren't really formal words, and their people have created these words in the last few years. And some people use Instagrammable and some people use Insta-worthy. So you could use either, but it's basically saying they will look good on Instagram. And so people put these images, these pictures on social media to show off. If you're showing off, you're saying, look at me, look at my fabulous lifestyle. I've been in Paris and here's a picture of the Eiffel Tower, and I've eaten at this restaurant and look at my fabulous food. And that's what they're doing. They're showing off. But very complex language and very less common language. IELTS examiners like less common language, so language that they're not hearing all the time from other candidates. So Instagrammable or Insta-worthy, use both and really impress them. And you can use that in other topics as well. If you're talking about your hometown, anything to do with places, those are very useful words. Okay, so I hope you found that quick run through of a couple of part 3 answers useful, and thank you very much for watching.